Well, now that you're familiar with the Fldigi user interface, let's talk about macros. Macros are all these buttons that are across the top of my interface here. Let's go up and take a look at the CQ macro. Notice that on the macro itself, there are little symbols after the lettering. The little triangle to the right looks like a play button, and then there's a straight up and down line. Just think of that as being stop. So that little diagram tells you that it's going to play and stop. Where the ones that have two lines, like the BTU below it, is just going to stop at the end. So that's how we kind of look at the macro and kind of got an idea if it's going to start transmitting and stop transmitting as part of the macro. You notice when I hover over the macro, it says left click to execute and right click to edit. So if I left click on any of these, it's actually going to do the macro. If I right click on it like I am now, it brings up the editing interface. So the macro is on the left-hand side, and all the things that I can put into the macro are on the right-hand side. We just use the green arrow button to push the particular one over. So if I was going to use my call, I'd highlight it, and then I could push it over, and it would put it in that part of the line. Of course, I can just use the keyboard to type anything that I want in, like I'm doing there, just deleting that particular thing. So you can write anything that you want in here, or you can use tags to pull information from somewhere else in the program to put in your macro. So you see the TX at the top and the RX at the bottom. That's where our transmit and receive commands are going to be. You can also see the label here at the bottom. These little symbols, I can never find them exactly where they are on the keyboard. So if I need to go over and create another tag with that particular symbol, I just copy it and then go over and paste it into the new one and then change the lettering. That's how I do it. I'm sure there's specific keys if you could figure out which ones these are. But that's how I copy the symbols into another button. So when you make any changes and when you're finished, you just come over and hit apply, which is like saving that particular button. Make sure you always do that. And then you just hit close to close the interface. I'll show you what the back to you looks like. BTU with the two lines, that means that it's not going to start playing, but it's going to stop and put it back into receive at the end of it. So we'll right click and look at that. And this is a typical back to you end of transmission macro. So basically it's back to you and then my call sign and then the letter K, which means done sending, and then it puts it back in receive. So you use this a lot of times when you're setting up the end of a conversation. So we'll close out of that. So you've seen the example of that. So let me do a typical macro where I would build something in my transmit box. So I'm going to use this third one down, the DE and me. I'm going to left click on that, and it puts the macro in the transition. If we actually look to the macro, all it is just DE and my call. So that's what the macro is. And it just puts when you click on it, it just puts that in your transmission window. Then I'm going to come up to my info and left click on that, and that puts my information in here. And then at the end of that, I'm going to click on the BTU one time, and then we have a complete conversation. So it's ready to go. All I would have to do is hit transmit to start transmitting this. But this would be a very typical conversation if you would do in PSK31. And that's how you can use macros to load them in and do the conversation. When I'm ready to transmit, I would just hit transmit, and it would start the transmission, and notice it's going to start at the very top and work its way down to wherever my cursor is. You notice my cursor is actually below the changeover down here. And so just remember, always get your cursor at the very end of whatever you're doing in the transmit window. So we're basically sending that. We're using PSK31, and you can see it's at 1500 of the waterfall, and it's making its way through the transmission. So normally whenever you do a macro, it's going to be pushed into the transmit window. Well, let me show you another use for macros. One of the things that we do all of the time is we change the modes that we're transmitting with. So if we're in the modes drop down, one of the two that I use all the time is MT63 2KL or Olivia 8500. But each time I've got to go and find the particular modem and then click on it to load it. Well, you'll notice on my middle macros here are commands to just change the modem, and it's not during transmission, it's just for my convenience. So I can click on Olivia 8500 and it gets loaded in the window, and then I can click on MT632KL, and now that's loaded as my transmit modem. So it just makes it really convenient. Let's take a look at Olivia 8500 so you can see what that looks like. So all that's in the macro is this modem and then the Olivia. And if you go to the select tag, all the modems are at the end basically. So if you slide all the way down to where you see modem, and then you can just look for the one that you're interested in. So in this case, it's Olivia 8500. And then if I was going to use that, I would just use the green arrow to push it over into the actual macro, and that's all there is to it. Of course, we just need it once, so I'll delete the rest of these. But you can set up the macro buttons to basically change modems for you, and it's so much more convenient to do that. The only two exceptions to that are the transmit and receive, and I can open the transmit. You can see all it is a transmit. There's a space on either side of it, and it's the button that's listed there. So that's all these are. So the transmit and receive I use a lot, and so I have them placed here. But basically, all of these are different versions. I might use Olivia 8500 or 16, or instead of MT63 2KL, I might use 1KL or 500L. But I can click on any of these, and it instantly changes it, and it makes it so much more convenient. So the last section of my macros we want to look at are these blue ones here on the right side. And I'm going to take you through a few of them just to give you a feel for what the macros look like. A common one is my information, and I showed you that earlier. Another one that you see often is gear brag. This is when you're telling other people about your system. So you can just see I have a gear brag with the radio that I'm using, what I normally use for power. I'm using a signal link. I'm inserting antenna, and I'm also inserting the Fldigi version. So I never have to update this. It's always going to show the current version I'm running. So that's my gear brag. Another one is weather. I bring that one up. TYS here is McGee Tyson in Knoxville. KTYS is the weather. I'll show you real quick. So it's just pulling the weather basically off the internet from another location. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to actually click on the weather, and it'll insert it filled in into my transmit window. So this is what the weather actually looks like and what I would be sending out. So it's gone and gotten the current information about the direction and speed of wind and temperature. All of the things that I chose as part of my weather configuration, the items that I chose is what it's going to insert. So that's how that works. And so when I'm building a transmit, that's how I can insert the weather. The last one on the right here is home brag, and this is just information specifically about me. That is a little bit funny. If you use my macros, and we'll talk about that later, please change this so you're not sending out this information for your home brag. Okay, so a couple other things we want to look at, and I want to show you is these last two on the bottom where we have Olivia and MT63. Notice the explanation point in front of it. I'm going to right click on that. This is basically a macro that I can actually use right in the transmit window during a transmission. So I could be transmitting this in Olivia, this upper part, and then when it gets to this macro with this explanation point in front of the M, if you have an explanation point there, it's actually going to make the transmission change at that point and change it into whatever you've chosen over here. So obviously because of the verbiage here, I would have been an MT63, and then it would change it back to Olivia. So that's how you can use these modem commands actually within a transmission if you use that explanation point. If you read about through the user's manual, it'll tell you more specifically how to do this. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that I do quite often check-ins. These are for our regional nets, and this particular check-in is one that I use quite often. It depends on how people want you to check in. But when it's a pure digital net, this is the type of information that they typically want you to put in. And no traffic means you just have no particular information for the net itself. So that's a typical check-in. So there you go. That's my list of macros. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to place a copy of my macro file. This is a Windows file, but I also have one that will work with other formats like Mac and Linux. I'll put those two files in a Dropbox location. So if you look at the bottom of this YouTube video under information, there will be places where you can link to my Dropbox, and then you can download this file and put it on your system. Now, we might have already talked about that before, but where you put it is you come to Files and go to Folder, and then, go to Macros, and just go to Open as if you were going to open a macro. And this will show you where on your computer your macro files are stored. Basically, for Windows, you're going to be on the C drive, and then you're going to be on the name that you're logged in at, and then you'll go to the Fldigi folder, and then within that folder, your macros folder. And the macro folder is actually where you're going to put that file in. And then once it's in that file folder, you can go and load it. So again, you would come up, go to macros, and drop down and open it, and actually open up that file, and it will load my macros onto your system. Just make your life a lot easier if you've got some of these pre-made. You can go through all the rest of them and look at them all. I have a series for Field Day here at the bottom, and you can see what's exactly in all my macros that I standardly use, and I hope that's helpful for you. There are 4 softwares that make up the Fldigi NBEMS suite of programs. There's Fldigi, FLMSG, Flwrap, and FLAMP. We finished our look at Fldigi, and now I'd like to introduce you to Flwrap. I'm going to start by showing you Flwrap and opening it up. So I click on Flwrap, and this is the interface. It's very straightforward, and it tells you exactly what you're going to be doing. You're basically going to be dragging and dropping files into this square. I'm going to go open up a demo file to show you how this works. So here I have 2 wrapped files. You could tell by the extension on the end of it. So to unwrap that file, I'm just going to drag it over and drop it into the square. And when I do that, it unwraps the file and then puts the file back in the folder that you took it from. So in this case, this is the unwrapped file. The other thing I wanted to show you is that we can wrap files. So here I have a text file and I want to wrap it. All I have to do is grab the file, again drag and drop it into the square, let it go, and now I have a wrapped file. And this wrap file is what I would drop into the transmit window to prepare to send it. One last thing I want to show you is that you can associate files in Windows. For this last file, I want to open it for you and show you that I've associated it with the Flwrap. If I come down to Properties, and this brings up the properties for it, you can see that it's associated with wrap. So this makes it a little bit quicker. I'll cancel out of that. Instead of having to open up this interface, I could just be looking at this file and just double click on it, and it will actually open the interface and go ahead and extract the file. So you can see there that it's extracted the file, and this is the unwrapped version of that. It's a 213 template file. So that's basically how wrap works. It really works behind the scenes in FL Message. When you use AutoSend, all of the wrapping is done automatically. But there are times when you do want to wrap and unwrap files manually, and that's how you basically do it. So once I have a file made and I want to drop it into the timeline, on the transmit window, again, I can just take the file that's wrapped and drop it into the window. and now you can see that it's in the window, and you can see it has the wrap header on it. You'll always see the wrap at the beginning and the wrap at the end, and it has the checksum. And basically that's what wrapping does. It wraps the file with a checksum so that you can verify when it's received on the far end that you got the complete file, and that's the purpose of Flwrap. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope that you'll stand by for the next one in our series, which will be learning how to use FL Message.